Hi, everyone. Welcome to Live Better Longer, Expert Secrets on Aging Well. This conversation is, and the Q&A later, brought to you by the American Federation for Aging Research and Prevention magazine. I am Sarah Smith, the content director for Prevention, where I oversee our monthly print magazine, our site, and pretty much anything else that you see our name on. I love my job because I am always learning something new. And that's why I'm so happy to be here today to learn a little bit more, and why I'm happy to be working with AFAR. This is the first of, I hope, many conversations about the science of aging that we'll do over Zoom with experts who can tell us what we can do to improve our lives and why that advice is really going to work. AFAR has an impressive history of supporting quality research, and Prevention is also deeply committed to bringing the best information to people. So today, I'm so pleased that I'll be talking to three terrifically smart experts. They are Dr. Steve Austad, AFAR's Senior Scientific Director. He's from the University of Alabama. Dr. Nathan LeBrasseur of the Mayo Clinic, and Dr. Claire McEvoy of Queen's University in Belfast. We're going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll take your questions, so don't forget to type them in at any time. We're going to start with Dr. Austad helping us understand how our bodies age, and that'll lay the groundwork, I think, for how Dr. LeBrasseur and Dr. McEvoy's research can be used to improve our lives right now. So, Dr. Austad, I'd love to start today by talking about what I think is a little bit of the elephant in the room. When should people be thinking about this? Is aging really more of an issue that young people should be thinking about, that we should be educating people in their 20s to prevent problems later?
Well, that is a really interesting question. And for most of the history of aging research, we probably would have said, you absolutely have to start as early as possible. And in fact, we still think that it's best to start taking care of yourself as early as possible. You can do some serious permanent damage to yourself if you do too many horrible things in your 20s. But one of the surprises that we found over, let's say, the last decade is that you can have an amazing increase in your health if you don't start until later in life. And this is something that we discovered almost by accident, but now that we're alerted to it, people should understand that no matter what age they are and no matter what kind of condition they've been in, they can improve. And that seems to me like a new message, and a message that we really need to get out to everyone. So starting early is better, but starting at any time to really take care of yourself is also good.
That is good. That's great news. And, you know, since we're talking today, not just about living longer, but living well that whole time, can you tell us what we need to understand about what happens to our bodies as we age?
Sure. Well, you can think of aging in simple terms as the fact that the fundamental processes of life are inherently damaging. So just by breathing, just by doing exercise, our bodies are having some damage that accumulates. But on the other hand, we have thousands and thousands of genes that are devoted to repairing anything that we happen to damage. And what aging is, it's a slight imbalance between the amount of damage that we undergo and our repair processes. And one of the things that we can do with the proper lifestyle habits, and more these days, potentially developing new medications, is to decrease the level of damage that we undergo and enhance the amount of repair so that we can really have quite a dramatic impact on our health. And I think people tend to think that a lot of this is in your genes, but a lot of research has demonstrated that only about 20 to 25% of how you age is in your genes. The rest is up to you. It's in your environment. It's how to take care of yourself.
So that's so interesting. So why then do some people live longer or stay healthier longer than others?
Well, it's a common, I mean, there are genes that we know about. So what I like to say to people is that if you want to live to be a healthy, vigorous, active 80 to 85-year-old, you need to exercise, eat right, do all the lifestyle factors. If you want to live to be a healthy, active, alert 105-year-old, you probably need to have the right parents. So most of us are not going to live that long, but most of us are very, very capable of keeping our health until our 70s and 80s if we do the right things. And the other experts will go into what some of those right things are.
Great. Can you tell us a little more about your research or again, going back to what it is that's different in the bodies of those people in their 70s who've been following some of these lifestyle things that we'll hear more about, and what's happening in the bodies of other people?
Sure. Well, what happens is, I told you there's this balance between damage and repair that's slightly in favor of damage. But what happens as you get older is that your repair mechanisms start to degrade, which means that you get less and less able to repair that damage. Let me just give you an example. You have about 40 trillion cells in your body, and within each of those cells, you have a yard or so of DNA. And so your body contains about 25 billion miles of DNA, if you think about it. That's pretty incredible. That DNA in each cell is damaged more than 10,000 times a day. But almost all of that damage is repaired. But that repair is a complex process. And the older we get, the less effective those mechanisms are. And that can lead to damage in a variety of ways. And so aging is not just a question of getting illnesses as you get older. You know, when you're 70, you can't run as fast as you could when you were 20, no matter how well you take care of yourself. So aging, in a certain sense, is inevitable, but you can have an enormous effect on exactly how fast it happens and how well you can maintain your physical condition.
That's really interesting and a really helpful way to visualize what's happening every day as we just live our lives, right? You know, and it sounds like, you know, to have discovered how these things work, you know, there's a lot of important research out there being done. You know, for the average person who isn't the one doing that research, you know, what's our role here as we are trying to learn more about our bodies?
Well, I'd say one of the things that you want to do is try to keep up on the research. I mean, one of the things I'm often asked is, we really don't understand aging, do we? And my answer is, in fact, we do. We understand a tremendous amount about aging. We know maybe 9 or 10 basic aging processes, and we're developing ways to affect those processes. So some of the research going on now in the labs of myself and Dr. LeBrasseur and some of the others on the call, we are actually looking for medications that can do some of the same things, that can alter the way our body age. So if you put those sorts of medications, once they're, and we have dozens and dozens of these, it's not like we only have a handful. All of these are validated mainly in laboratory animals, not in humans yet. But that's coming. That's on the near horizon. And then you put those things together with the proper lifestyle habits. And we're looking at the prospect of extending our healthy years by a substantial amount, perhaps as much as 10 or 20 years. And if you think about it, if we could expect to be a healthy 90 or 100 years old, how much would that change about human existence? It would change virtually everything, in my view.
Absolutely. Change everything from family to work to, you know, how we all interact. That's an amazing thought experiment, really, which you're at the front lines of, you know, making it happen. So that's really fascinating. You know, I'd really like to bring in Dr. LeBrasseur and Dr. McEvoy, who I think can help us drill down into these lifestyle issues that you've been talking about. So Dr. LeBrasseur, your area of expertise is exercise, and Dr. McEvoy, yours is nutrition. So could you each tell us how what you study affects the aging process that we've been talking about? So Dr. LeBrasseur, would you begin?
Sure. So as Dr. Austad nicely said, aging is the primary risk factor for the overwhelming majority of chronic diseases, whether we're talking about Alzheimer's disease, osteoporosis, cancer, diseases of our lungs, our kidneys, our muscle. Aging is by far the greatest risk factor. So we've been incredibly interested in understanding the biology that Dr. Austad referred to, kind of the different forms of damage to our cells and molecules. And what we've been able to do, and when I say we as a field of understanding the biology of aging, is really looking closely at how exercise can actually alter that process. And we think of the conditions of aging as a late life event, right? That 90% of cancers happen after the age of 50. Alzheimer's disease risk goes much, much higher after the age of 65. But that biology that underlies those conditions is hard at work throughout our lifespan. And that's what Dr. Austad referred to as, pick your parents wisely, right? And what we're understanding now is that we think about different interventions to target aging, and we think about drugs. But what's amazing to me is that exercise can actually cause a lot of the repair processes to be more effective and more active in individuals throughout the lifespan and really impact the trajectory of aging. And the important distinction is, between chronological age and biological age. And it's really that biology that we're trying to understand in the laboratory and understand how exercise and active lifestyles can really influence that biology from happening.
Interesting, thank you. And Dr. McEvoy, how about nutrition?
So yeah, nutrition is a really important component of a healthy lifestyle. We know that making smart food choices can actually help us feel good, but also prevent premature aging and reduce the risk of chronic diseases in later life. So the data tells us that poor quality diets are one of the biggest contributors to ill health in our population. And we have so much evidence over the past number of decades from population studies and clinical trials and it fairly consistently tells us that people who eat a healthy plant-based diet can experience longer life expectancy, but also have years of life without debilitating diseases such as heart disease, stroke, cancers, osteoporosis. So we know that these healthy diets are nutrient dense, and what that means is that they have fewer calories and a lot more micronutrients than the average American diet. And it's probably those components that are what causes our slowing down of the aging process. So healthy diets help keep our weight under control, they help improve our metabolic health, but they also provide our cells with all of the range of micronutrients, including the antioxidant vitamins and minerals, bioactive compounds, and dietary fiber that helps protect our cells against some of the damaging causes of the aging process, such as oxidative stress and all of these toxins that are caused by just the general environmental conditions that we live in. And also can actually help to reduce some of the DNA damage. So nutrition is a very important part of a healthy lifestyle. It probably works in tandem with other lifestyle factors and our genetic makeup, but certainly it's something that everyone can do right now, no matter what age we are, to help improve our aging trajectory.
That's great and very heartening, but what specifically should we be eating? You said plant-based or plant-forward, or can you just tell us a little bit more about the kinds of food you're talking about?
Yeah, so there's so many popular diets out there that it's really hard to sort of navigate this field. But for an individual, it really depends on their health, their health goals. But if we're talking about healthy aging and disease prevention for aging, then the scientific evidence supports the Mediterranean diet. So this is a really rich, nutrient-dense, plant-based diet. It's a diet that's rich in fruit and vegetables and whole grains and nuts. It also has a moderate intake of fish and low-fat dairy products, and it's very low in processed foods in general, sugary snacks, and also red meat. The main fat source comes from extra virgin olive oil, And the diet also permits a small amount of alcohol, usually in the form of wine with meals. So the health properties of a Mediterranean diet are thought to be due to the combination of foods and nutrients as consumed together, rather than one single nutrient or food on its own. And there are a wide number of health benefits, but mostly the evidence points to really improving our heart and circulatory system. And this has been most recently demonstrated in a large trial in Spain in over 7,000 people, where the people who followed a Mediterranean diet supplemented with either nuts or olive oil had a 30% reduced risk of developing heart disease and stroke compared to those who are following a low-fat diet. So the results of this study are very important because they tell us that changes to the quality of our dietary pattern can have profound impacts on our heart and circulatory system. But also, even when there's no weight loss involved, which I think is really important. And also, we're interested in the impact of this diet now on brain health and brain aging. And there is some studies that, including studies that we have conducted, that have linked a greater adherence to a Mediterranean diet to slower cognitive decline and reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease in later life.
Wow.
So Mediterranean diet's probably the most scientifically researched evidence-based diet for healthy aging.
Well, it also sounds delicious, which is good. But you know, it also, I think sometimes when people hear diet, we think it's a diet like a weight loss, or it's a prescribed certain eat this today and that tomorrow. But it sounds like what you're talking about is the mixture of food, and it's not something you do for 21 days. It's longer than that. Am I right?
Yes, it's not a short-term fix. It's something that we need to sort of dedicate and make a lifestyle choice with when we're talking about changing our dietary habits. And it's really good to sort of start small and build up over time, and change the quality of the diet and do things that you can maintain in the longer term. So short-term fixes tend to be short-lived in terms of health benefits. If we were looking to change our aging trajectory and improve our health status in the longer term, then we do need to have a dietary pattern that is evidence-based and also is highly delicious and easy to adhere to.
You know, speaking of lifestyle and patterns, Dr. LeBrasseur, can you talk about exercise from that point of view as something beyond, you know, oh, I've got to go to the gym, or, oh, I'm going to train for a marathon and then never run again. You know, you talk about it as part of your life.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels to healthy eating behaviors, right, with healthy active lifestyles. And I really emphasize two critical features of active lifestyles. One is, I would just say the take-home message today, if anything, is sitting is the new smoking, right? We're now able to run our lives from our armchair or our lazy boy. And that's a challenge. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of technology, has done great things for many people, but it's also kind of enabled us to be incredibly sedentary throughout the day and really not have to do anything. And really getting people off the couch, out of their office chair, out of the car seat, and starting to move more is really critical to kind of promote health. The other factor, which is a little bit trickier, is this idea of having moderate to vigorous activity most days of the week. And it doesn't look like we need a lot of it, but the Surgeon General's recommendations of 30 minutes most days of the week seems to stick in many, many research studies. And that, you know, for some people might mean bright lights in the gym with mirrors and young people. And that's not what we need, but we just need to get people to exert themselves at a higher level where maybe they're getting a little bit of shorter breath and pushing themselves a little bit. And the form that exercise comes in probably doesn't matter, but it's just finding something that they enjoy, something that they can do to socialize, whatever the trick is to promote long-term adherence is the key. And that's the challenge. So I think much like some of the diet crazes that we read about, get confused by, it's the same thing with exercise, where there's a new fad or a new craze, people adopt it early on, and then a week later or 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, they're back to that kind of sedentary, inactive lifestyle. And that's the battle that we all face. Even, I personally face that challenge of just kind of keeping it interesting and keeping it exciting.
Yeah, so there isn't one particular, this is the kind of exercise that everyone should do? Is there any research around a particular type, or is it really just finding what works for you?
Yeah, so there's a mix. So we typically put exercise into a couple of different buckets. One is kind of this endurance or aerobic exercise training, which you think of as walking or running or cycling or swimming. And the other bucket would be resistance training, which is more kind of weight-based exercise to build muscle. Both of those programs are important. And now we're also in this era of high-intensity interval training, which nicely combines them in a way. And when they're studied, there's clear benefits for all those activities. But much like the Mediterranean diet, endurance exercise is by far the most studied and shown to benefit multiple health systems. So, I think, we often think of kind of musculoskeletal health with exercise. We often think of cardiovascular health, but now there's very clear data on cognitive health and function, and importantly in today's era, immune health and function. So it's really, it's the most studied, and it doesn't mean that these other forms of exercise don't elicit benefit, but that's just what we understand the best today.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you think
Sarah, could I just make a point here that I think is interesting? I think if we call it exercise, that tends to put people off. They tend to think of it as some sort of formal thing. But if you think of the 300,000-year history of our species, for virtually all of that, that was life. We call exercise today. That was life. A friend of mine said, what we are is we're activity deficient. And I think that's the way to think of it. You need to stay active. Our bodies are designed for hundreds of thousands of years to be really, really active. And it's only been, in the last blink of an eye that we've been able to sit in a chair all day and consider that a normal day. To our ancestors, that would be highly non-normal. So I think that it's a way to think about it that I think might help people think about it. It's much easier to stay active than to do exercise, perhaps.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's just shifting your mindset to being active and moving and knowing that that's what your body needs and wants. So, Dr. LeBrasseur, do you think HIIT is a trend, or is it going to stick around, do you think?
No, I think it'll stick around. It's had a pretty good shelf life already. And, again, the thing I like about it is that it combines some more intense exercise, which I really think is good for the system to drive adaptation. So think of our bodies as like any other material where when you stress it, it learns how to develop and resilience to that stress and adapt to that stress. And you need to push the system a little bit to get health benefits. And that's what I like about HIIT. And there seems to be some special sauce in there with kind of the high intensity interval periods followed by rest that also probably promotes some compliance, because it's not kind of going all out for an hour, which is just hard for anyone to do, right? But having these rest periods seems to promote adoption and compliance.
Oh, that's a good point. Building in the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dr. McEvoy and Dr. LeBrasseur, let me ask you, what is something everyone could literally do today to get on the right path for healthy aging? So Dr. McEvoy, give us a tip.
So about 3/4 of our population have low micronutrient intake. So what I'm going to recommend is to think about fruit and vegetables. And most of us don't eat enough of those if we're honest. So, but it's about really trying to create healthy habits. So just like, diet is all about, what our habits are and how they're formed. And much like we create unhealthy habits, we can also create healthy habits. So it's all about starting small, selecting something easy to do and how it can be embedded easily into the lifestyle. So choose one small thing, like if it's one extra portion of vegetables per day, and say that you're going to have those with your main meal during the day, and after a while, that actually becomes a habit and you don't even have to think about it. And at that stage, you can start making your next goal and moving towards achieving, 5 to 8 portions of fruit and vegetables each day. That's my tip.
That's a great point, because when you say, 5 to 8, I feel slightly overwhelmed, even though
Yes.
it's healthy. But I think, if I add one more portion today of vegetables, like when I'm not just trying to get my son to eat vegetables and I eat them even when he can't see me, that might. Okay, Dr. LeBrasseur, what's something we can do today?
Yeah, I think importantly, it's accepting where you are today, right? That, if your long-term goal is to run a marathon, but today you're having trouble running a block, just accept that, right? You are where you are, and anything you do will benefit you, right? And that's critically important, where sometimes we think so much about, the folks that we think are regular exercisers and what they're doing. You say, I could never do that. But that's not the point. It's really accepting where you are today. And just really, I think more than anything is get moving. And what is it that will get you moving? And we all have different things. Some of us are very competitive and are kind of the quantified selves, where you need your Fitbit or your Apple Watch to kind of understand what you've done. But a lot of people really enjoy the social component of exercise as well, and identifying peers that would be willing to kind of engage in a more active lifestyle with you, whether it's at work or within your neighborhood or with your family. Again, is a really positive move, and just with the mindset of getting more active is really the take-home message for me.
That's great. I love that point of accepting where you are now, because you'll never go out for the walk or the jog if you think you need to do 5 miles today, or even 2, right? That's great. Before we go to the questions from the audience, I just have one more question for each of the 3 of you. So how do you think that we, people out there might be thinking about aging incorrectly? And what's the better way to be thinking? Dr. Austad, would you start us off?
Yes, I think that people think too much about aging fatalistically. Like there's nothing that I can. People are thinking the same thing about the COVID-19 right now, and it drives me crazy. There are things you can do. You can age better, just like you can avoid COVID-19 better if you listen to people who know, you do sensible things. And so, and the other thing is the aging confers wisdom. I used to work in a project in Papua New Guinea with basically hunter-gatherers. The thing that I noticed about them was that the older people were revered for their knowledge of unusual events. If you wanted to know during a drought where you could find water, those were the people that knew. And I think there's just an inherent ageism here, where we think, well, we really don't have much to learn from people past a certain age. And I think that's a mistake.
Great, excellent point. Thank you. Dr. LeBrasseur, do you have something to add about how we might be thinking about aging wrong?
Yeah, I think Dr. Austad said it very well, and it's just not being so fatalistic, or thinking that aging is so rigid that it's not malleable. And for me, it's thinking of aging in a little bit of a broader sense of how things like exercise can help so many different organ systems, and even mental health. We haven't touched on mental health at all, but this is a big challenge that was probably underappreciated before the pandemic, has been brought to light during the pandemic with depression and anxiety. And anyways, I just want to comment that, exercise in and of itself can impact the health and function of multiple organ systems that are adversely affected by aging. I might have went off topic there, but
very helpful.
And I would just say, and maybe this is a good segue to Dr. McEvoy, is please don't use the scale as your only metric of health. I think I hear this so much, where people talk about engaging in an exercise program, and then 2 weeks later they look at the scale as, is the exercise working? And guess what? They haven't lost weight, so they think the exercise isn't doing anything. But if you can just kind of, check in on your mental health and your physical health, and how do you feel? Maybe that's the better metric for you to focus on to start. And of course, we can talk about a number of clinical parameters, but I think those kind of self-reports are very helpful.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned that because, you know, learning from you about how exercise, you know, affects your whole body, it's really not just about weight. It's really about all the mechanisms in your body. So I think if people can keep that in mind and not, like you said, just focus on that number. Dr. McEvoy, a last word from you.
Just to echo what Dr. Austad and Dr. LeBrasseur said, that I mean, age is just, for many people, it's just a number, and we have to get beyond that. It's about really how you feel in yourself, and actually going beyond some of the lifestyle factors from just nutrition and physical activity, but thinking about how connected you are with your family and friends, and that can make a huge difference to how happy and contented and satisfied that you feel. And sometimes those factors are actually very, very important in how we embrace aging. And as Dr. Austad said, it's all about when you get older, you do have a certain level of wisdom that you can pass on from one generation to another, and I think that's so important as well. So having a very purposeful life where you're participating and living to your full potential across no matter what age you are, and I think that is so important. And of course, nutrition and physical activity, those behaviors can help support you to remain active and engaged in all of your activities in your daily life.
Thank you so much. I just love that you all ended up bringing up mental health and mindset and wisdom, and I think that's such an important note to end this part of the conversation on, because we're going to turn it over. I have a lot of really great questions coming in from all of our wise and curious audience members. So let's see, the first is about sleep. What role does sleep play in aging? And and alongside that, how can the type or timing of food and exercise enhance the quality of my sleep? So can one of you jump in on sleep and quality of sleep?
Well, I'll just say, remember I said that everything kind of degrades gradually as you get older, and sleep quality is one of those things. And so what you can do sleep is incredibly important. It's important in every aspect of your life. And a lot of modern life is designed to make sleep difficult. You know, the lights we have at night make sleep difficult. It is very important. And there are things that you can do to improve your levels of sleep. And I think, you know, being a university professor, I think academics tend to be chronically sleep deprived, and that's not a good thing. So that's something that we can all work on, and it's all something that we could probably do better, but it also fits very well with the exercise modality, because I know I sleep much, much better when I've had a very active physical day than I do when I've sat and played with my computer all day.
Great, thank you. Anything to add on sleep, or I have another question if not?
I'll just add to the nerdy science answer is that's when a lot of the repair processes are very, very active. So, you know, that's when you're improving your biology.
Great. Thank you for that reminder. That's really important. Steve, you mentioned that there is research on medications that can affect the aging process, like metformin. Tell us more about that. So what are the current recommendations for taking metformin for healthy aging rather than diabetes or blood sugar issues?
So the current recommendation from my perspective is not to take metformin until we know more about it. So the whole story about metformin, now this is a medication that's taken by millions of people and has been for more than 50 years to treat diabetes. There's a lot of suggestive evidence that it may be very beneficial for combating some of the diseases of aging. However, there's never been a large study. Now, it's a very safe drug, so you're not likely to hurt yourself with metformin, but the evidence that it actually does affect these aging processes is still in a very rudimentary state. Now, we're getting ready to start in the near future a formal study where people, a proper study, a placebo-controlled, blinded study, to really find out if metformin has these wonderful properties at preventing cardiovascular disease, cancer, and dementia. If that's true, that's huge. But I would not recommend that people start taking it without these studies being completed. I know there's lots of people that do that. And because of its lack of side effects, it's probably going to be all right. But we really don't know. You know, it's everything we know. It's what's called observational epidemiology. It's here's a group of people taking it. They have certain things. Here's another group. But we don't know if there's something else underlying that. And I think I make an analogy with what we used to think about hormone replacement for postmenopausal women. It used to be that virtually all the observational epidemiology suggested that that was a miracle drug for health and longevity. Once we did the formal trial in the Women's Health Initiative, turned out, wait a second, there are some downsides, some serious downsides to this. So until we know more, I would just be very conservative and not recommend that people take metformin unless it's been prescribed by your physician.
Great, thank you for that recommendation. Claire, speaking of things you might take, there's a question about vitamins and supplements, because there's so many out there competing for our attention to supplement our diet. So how does someone know whether they're actually, which ones are effective or which ones are important in a certain time of life, like midlife or even later?
Yeah, so our requirements for nutrients change during the life course, and as we get older, our metabolic rate tends to drop a little bit, but we still have the same requirements to meet our nutrient requirements, and they can even be increased in some cases because sometimes we don't absorb them as well, or they're not used as well by the body. So there are a couple of nutrients that we would be highlighting most when we move from midlife to older age, and that includes vitamin D. I think most of us could benefit from a vitamin D supplement, particularly if you don't get enough sunlight. So if you're staying indoors, and that especially is around, but you know, in terms of the coronavirus pandemic, that seems to affect a lot of people. The second one is some of the B vitamins, like B12, for example. And that there is some evidence that older people do have increased requirements for B12. So that might be something else. From the studies that have been conducted, it's like Dr. Austad said earlier, some of the epidemiology says that, you know, and that's the observational population study says that higher levels of these nutrients can improve outcomes. But when we come to do clinical trials with supplements, the evidence is not so strong. So taking supplements don't always benefit everyone. They're likely to have more benefit in people who have low status of some nutrients that are being supplemented. And also we have to be careful that some of these nutrients also have pretty toxic effects in the body. So having high doses of supplements is actually not a very good thing. So if you don't have a very good diet and it's not balanced and you can't get your micronutrients from your diet, then a general multivitamin supplement is fine, and a vitamin D supplement may be necessary, but not a high dose. You don't really need high dose supplements of any nutrients.
Really good to know. That's really helpful. Staying on the subject of supplements, we have a question about NAD boosters and what recommendations, you know, do they work? What recommendations do you have for their use. And I've heard them referred to as NAD, but you can tell me if you actually call them NAD. Dr. Austad, do you have an opinion?
I guess I would say similar to what I said about metformin. The idea behind NAD boosters is a very intriguing idea. I would say that the evidence is not yet in to make me confident that this is going to be beneficial. And so, you know, I'm a hard-nosed skeptical scientist. Unless the evidence is there, I'm not going to advocate anything. And for NAD, this may turn out to be the greatest thing since antibiotics, but we don't know yet if that's the case.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving away from those types of things. Memory loss. Is this a normal part of aging? I think everybody worries about this the second you lose your keys twice in a day, no matter how old you are. So how can food or exercise relate to memory? And what else can we know about this?
Yeah, so we have a really strong interest in how exercise influences the brain. And what's really fascinating is we often talk about exercise in the context of improving our ability for physical function because of its effects on muscle, or we think about how exercise improves our metabolism because of its effects on muscle. But what's really interesting, and how exercise improves our resilience to stress because of, in part, its effects on muscle. But what's really interesting is muscle also produces factors that communicate to other organ systems, including the brain, and through that process can stimulate both new nerve growth and prevent nerve damage, or neuron damage, I should say, not nerve. And these are the critical elements in our brain that play a role in memory and learning and executive function. And the data is really, really quite compelling now. So it's encouraging news because, as you know, we're kind of seeing a flattening of expected lifespan now, but there is more and more cases of Alzheimer's disease because of, you know, the aging of the population, the absolute number, I should say. And what can we do about this? Because this is a major threat to our, not just our health, but our economics and everything else, public policy. And again, I would just really be on the stump again for exercise as a very powerful way to impact the health of our brains as we age.
Right, to keep that living better longer, not just
right.
But it's gonna.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned the word healthspan yet today, Steve, which is pretty surprising. But just so folks know, we're not here to promote aging research so folks can live until they're 120 and feel like they're 120. That's, none of us have that goal, right? And it's really kind of living healthy and being optimizing our function throughout our expected lifespan.
Anything else on memory, Claire or Steve? Some more.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interest in how nutrition can impact brain aging and help to preserve cognitive functions as we get older. And yes, ourselves and other groups have been doing some research in this area. In fact, we have linked the Mediterranean diet, as I mentioned earlier. There is some evidence and accumulating evidence to show that greater adherence to a Mediterranean diet can actually slow the rate of cognitive decline as we grow older, and also help to reduce Alzheimer's disease in later life. And some of the mechanisms behind this are probably because Mediterranean diet has such an impactful benefit on our heart and circulatory system, and we know what's good for the heart is good for the brain. Also, there seems to be some evidence that suggests that eating a healthy plant-based diet and a nutrient-dense diet can also reduce the levels of neuroinflammation, so the amount of inflammation in our brain, and also help to preserve some of the structures and functions of our brain cells that keep our memory and learning functions preserved through our lifespan. So there are probably lots of ways in which nutrition can improve and preserve or help to slow down brain aging, but we have lots of research to do in this area.
So one thing to add to that, one thing we haven't talked about, we've talked about staying physically active. We haven't talked about staying mentally active. And that is really important. We know from lots and lots of epidemiological studies that one big protective factor against Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia is a college education or an advanced degree. Now, we don't understand that really, and we don't think, certainly it's not getting the piece of paper yourself, but what it might be is staying mentally active. And I know that there are people who are developing games now, developing these in concert with scanning images of the brain at the same time to try to develop better and better ways to stimulate your brain as you get older. So, you know, for all our focus on physical activity, it may be that mental activity is also very important.
Great, and I've heard that it's not just doing crossword puzzles. Is that right? Like, crossword puzzles are great if you love them, but when you talk about stimulating the brain, you don't just mean doing a puzzle. Am I right?
No, if you do a lot of crossword puzzles, you will stay good at doing crossword puzzles. We're talking about something more general than that. And I'd say sitting there in front of a screen watching other people for long periods of time is probably the antithesis of what we should be doing with our brains.
So we're going to say that when we are done here, everyone should go out for a walk and learn something new and buy olive oil.
Absolutely.
Okay. You know, I have a sense that a lot of the people on the call are feeling, you know, convinced and inspired, but we have an interesting question that's a little tricky perhaps for Nathan and Claire, that one of the audience members says, my older parents do not eat well and don't exercise. So what recommendations do you have for how I can encourage them to make improvements from a distance? So if you're not even there with someone that you really that you love and want to help.
Yeah, that's really tough. And sometimes I take the easy out on that question and say that's not the type of science I do. But you know, I think we all face this challenge with our loved ones, and I think just encouraging them to take the small steps that we talked about earlier of just, you know, trying something new and something they enjoy, just to get moving. And I know that's a very soft, not very concrete answer, but it is a challenge, and we don't trivialize that challenge. And that's also, you know, it goes all the way from children to older adults, right? That we're trying to find new ways to promote physical activity. And, you know, we haven't talked at all about health discrepancies, but some of the different barriers to different folks for this. And older adults certainly have barriers that folks on this screen don't have. So.
Claire, do you have anything to add to that? I think that's a great point about remembering to start small with other people too.
Absolutely. I think part of the problem when it comes to changing behavior, any kind of behavior, is that behaviors are established over the course of our lives, and sometimes they can be very difficult to break through. But it's sometimes we want to change other people's behaviors, and really it's about the person themselves and how they can change their behavior. And sometimes, and it's back to what we said earlier, sometimes people have this fatalistic attitude towards aging. They think they're a certain age, it's too late for them to change. And actually it's about making them realize that there is the scope for change at any age, and even small changes can reap big benefits in terms of how we feel in ourselves. And diet and lifestyle can help people feel good, but they also have these added health benefits for the aging trajectory. So yeah, it's about finding out what sort of change is suitable and can fit into someone's lifestyle very easily without such a big sort of revolution, and helping to encourage that. But actually it's the person themselves that need to take control over that, I think.
That's a really good point. And I like when you say, you know, encourage them. I think you put it in such a really positive way, you know, that it, if we're trying to help other people, it's helping them see not just you need to go for a walk every day or you need to do this. It's like your life is maybe more than you even realize. There's so much wonderful, you know, things you can still experience. So thank you for bringing that up. Nathan, I'm gonna give you one more question, and then I have a final question for all of you that's come in. So Nathan, an audience member says, I'm starting to be more physically active and experiencing some pain in my muscles and joints. So I think that's probably pretty common when people move, you know, from a very sitting heavy lifestyle. So how do they know what's normal, you know, no pain, no gain, and when should they see a doctor?
Yeah, so I would just, you know, so I didn't say this earlier, but I'm also a physical therapist by training, and you know, I think it's very important to be aware of your symptoms. And if you are having pain that particularly increases with physical activity, that's time to reach out and get help. And I would just say sometimes primary care docs are not particularly well versed in kind of how to best prescribe or adapt exercise to what your limitations may be or what your symptoms may be. If your pain is caused by osteoarthritis or something else, and asking for a referral to a physical therapist is a great idea, or someone in physical medicine rehab, to help you kind of understand what's the source of the pain and how to work around it and address it. And I guess this is, you know, the other take-home message for everybody is really being a champion for your own health. And sometimes you have to be a little bit more aggressive with these things. And again, I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but if their answer is giving you a pain medication, it's not fixing the problem, right? And it's not going to help you get more active. We get to the root of it with the right professionals.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it really goes back to this whole idea that the healthy aging is really, it's a whole lifestyle. It's, you know, taking control for yourself, you know, making these good choices in every way. And sometimes that choice might be getting another opinion or seeing a physical therapist, and, you know, instead of saying, oh, forget it, it just hurts, I can't do it. So.
Yeah, and I would just say too that a lot of people assume that rheumatoid arthritis or osteoarthritis, so kind of problems with our joints and our bones, are restrict activity and exercise, or kind of contraindications, if you will, for participating in those activities. And there's a ton of evidence now that exercise is actually beneficial in those conditions.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, you guys, this has been so terrific. To wrap up, we have another question that, you know, we've talked a lot about the research behind aging and diet and exercise. And so someone wants to know, how can I get involved in the research on aging? And then is this still being done at all with social distancing? And how can people qualify and help?
Well, as the senior scientific director of AFAR, I would say that one of the things you can do is go to the AFAR webpage and look at what's going on and look at opportunities. For instance, this metformin trial, it's called the TAME trial, that will be starting shortly, is going to be looking for participants. And that would be a good way to start. But there are lots of activities that you can stay in tune with if you follow what's going on the AFAR webpage, because it really is updated all the time and has not only great advice, but if you see a study, or if you read about a study in the newspaper and it has the name of the person that's running the study, you could always contact that person and ask if they're looking for volunteers.
That's great. I don't think probably most people realize that you can just ask. That's great. Is there anything that you add, our other panelists here, on getting involved, or what you're looking for, what kind of person is appropriate?
Yeah, I think just being aware of what's happening at your local academic medical centers in terms of research activities, and really kind of being a spokesperson for us to kind of dismiss the idea that this is all science fiction, that we can do something about aging. It's really science now. It's an exciting time for us in the field, and we're incredibly excited to see how some of these different interventions, whether they're drugs, diets, or exercise, or combinations thereof, can impact the trajectory of aging. So, you know, organizations like the American Federation for Aging Research, or AFAR, and other organizations are doing an outstanding job at really promoting this work.
Great. Claire, any last extra tip, or?
I work in public health research, and in addition to sort of asking people to help out and participate in our studies, we also ask people to get involved in helping us design studies, and are involved from the very beginning of the research process right through to the end, where they help us, disseminate some of our findings to a broader audience. So see if there's opportunities through your academic centres to do that. I mean, I think it's definitely a great process, not only for us as academics, but also for the people who participate.
That's really great. Yeah, I think it would probably be super interesting. It's something that at Prevention we're really interested in helping people understand more about too, because I think a lot of our readers are interested in, taking an active role. So thank you guys. This has just been so fascinating. And I love your, enthusiasm and commitment to aging research. So please, stay, everyone who's on this call, please follow AFAR and Prevention on social media to hear more about other webinars and conversations that we have in the future on other related topics. And the AFAR website is afar.org, and to follow them on social is afar.org altogether. Prevention Mag is our social media, and prevention.com is our site. So please join us in all of those places. And again, I'm Sarah Smith from Prevention, here today with these three terrific experts, and thank you all for your insight and advice, and I think we're all inspired to live long and healthy.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody.